Yeah, so hello everybody. I'm super excited to be here today. That's actually my very first time here in China and also my very first time on stage. So let's see how that goes. Maybe it's also my last time. And the reason why I'm here today is because I was super lucky to get awarded with the Apple Vision Pro Game of the Year at the App Store Awards in Los Angeles with my game Porta Nubi. And today I want to tell you a bit about my games, how I got to the award, and what I think is important in spatial computing. So let's start. My name is Michael Temper, and I studied app development in my bachelor's and game development in my master's. And then I worked for 3 years as an iOS developer, where we developed apps for other companies, so at an app agency. And during work, I often saw I don't have time to try out the latest technologies. So I started with my own games to get better as an iOS developer. And then I founded my company called Tempuno. And since then I make apps and games for iOS, macOS, tvOS, and now with a focus on visionOS. But where did I actually get my inspiration from? From the very first Apple device I ever bought, which was an iPod Touch. And the first app I ever installed was Doodle Jump. And it's a super fun game, but the fact that actually fascinated me about it was that it was done by only 2 people. And that's basically what my indie journey started, because I thought maybe one day I can do something similar on my own. So years later, I started with my games, my Ploppy series. And the very first game I ever created was Ploppy Pop. And the idea was a bit childish, because maybe you see it from the shape and the color of the ploppies. So the idea was that those are pieces of poo, and you have to tap them before they fall into the toilet. And it was working fine until I submitted it for app review, and Apple said no, the concept cannot be about poo. So I took them and spread them on the top, and then the first ploppy was born. And today I'm actually happy about that, because now there's something unique. And since I was never a big fan of ads in mobile games or pay-to-win mechanisms, the only thing I was selling were skins in the game. And at some point, I already had so many skins that I was thinking of what game I could do next. And since I do everything on my own, so developing the game, marketing it, creating all the assets, I wanted to keep the gameplay simple. And that's when I came up with my next idea called Ploppy Pairs, which is a card matching game for kids. So I need a lot of assets, but the gameplay is simple. And as I said before, I always tried to try out the latest Apple technologies, and back then SharePlay was super new. And as we can see here, with that it was able to play together across multiple platforms. So when you tap one card on a device, it also flips on the other devices. And another technology I tried for the first time was VoiceOver. This way you can play the game even if you're blind. So it always tells you the index of the card, and when you tap it, it tells you the name of the image and if it's a match or not. And then I kind of sticked to the kids games, and my next game was just a simple 2D hidden object game called Where is Ploppy? And the last mobile game I made was Ploppy Drop, and that was more of a challenge, because I wanted to see if it's possible to make a game in 1 week. I reused some assets, but overall it worked out fine. And then the announcement of the Apple Vision Pro came. And I thought, that's my chance. It's always good to be one of the very first at something. But the problem back then was that visionOS was not available yet. And therefore, I tried ARKit and RealityKit on iOS. And I made an augmented reality version of my game Ploppy Pairs. And it was working fine, but it was a bit lame because it was not so immersive. You still had to hold the phone and tap the cards on the screen. But the good thing was, since I used Swift, it was super easy to bring it then to visionOS, because I could reuse 80 to 90% of the code, and everything else worked out of the box. So I only had to make some small adaptations. And since the beginning, it was always important to me to really add value to the platform. Because I never saw the advantage of augmented reality if you have just a 3D model floating in front of you, if I could navigate it much more easily on a phone or on a Mac, for example. And I tried it here with SharePlay for floppy pairs. Again, I could reuse most of the code, but this way it was much more immersive. Because as we can see here, the friend of mine sits at home on his couch, I'm in the office, and we play together as if we're in the same room together. And that's the level of immersion you cannot get on any other Apple platform. And since I had some time left until the release of the Apple Vision Pro, I decided that I also want to bring my second game very floppy on the Apple Vision Pro. And again, instead of having just a simple 2D hidden object game, I made use of the whole room. So the players can really step into the game and tap the floppies directly, which leads to a much more immersive experience. And this also then brought me to my first visionized job, which was helping the Apple Arcade and Apple Design Award-winning game Gibbon Beyond the Trees to bring their game to the new platform. Together we created an immersive environment where the players feel like they are in the jungle themselves. And after doing so many ports, I decided that I want to make a game where you can really feel that it is made for Apple Vision Pro. And that's when I came up with the idea of Porta Nubi. Porta Nubi is an immersive puzzle game, and the gameplay is pretty simple. You have a start that emits light, and you have to bring that to the goal. But here's the problem, that we have the cloud that blocks the light. So how do we get the light through the cloud? By cutting holes. So with each hand, you can cut one hole. And then the solution is simple, because you can cut one hole in the front, another one in the back, the light goes through the cloud, and you're done. But here's the catch now. While you play through the game, you suddenly come across this level. Here the goal is in 90 degrees to the start. And how do we solve that one? And this is again the point where I tried to add value to the platform. Because when you press the holes for a bit longer, the cloud suddenly expands around you, and you are inside the cloud. And there you have portals on your hands, where you can catch the light with one hand and guide it with the other one. So the players become a part of the game itself. But how did I get there? So that's the very first version of Porta Nubi. No one else has ever seen it before, but the gameplay back then was still different, because I had the idea that you have to solve puzzles outside the box and inside the box. And you have to solve them to continue on the other side. And back then I used the portal material, so those are not real holes, and it was already possible to go inside. But I showed it to one of my colleagues, and he tried it, and then he asked, wouldn't it be much nicer when you cut holes and then you can really look through the box? And I gave that a try, and it was much better. And that's also the point where I came up with the idea that you can guide light with your hands. It had a bit of a Marvel style back then, but it was still working fine for a prototype. So I started super simple, with a prototype, just some gray boxes, simple colors and straight lines. And then I did a lot of playtests with friends, families and other developers. I was also lucky enough to get a ticket for Apple Startup DC. And I took the opportunity to fly to Cupertino and talk to the Apple developers and also other developers from the community to get their feedback. And then I took that feedback home and implemented it. And then I had a very first release version of the game. And while it was already fun to play, you could still feel that something's off. And since I'm not an artist, I went back to Broken Rules and talked to their creative director. And together we then sat down and checked what we could improve in the game. And he gave me some tips, like for example, changing the color palette that it better fits to the environment of the game, And this is what brought me to the version I have today. And while posting about the progress of my game, my university reached out to me asking if I could imagine teaching VisionOS. And since I'm always happy to share my knowledge and experience with this platform and see what others can create, I started to teach VisionOS. And today I also would like to give you some tips on what I think is important for spatial computing. So first of all, make your app as inclusive as possible. What do I mean by that? Think about in what environments will my app be used. I had this, for example, in Porta Nubi. We had this empty room in the office, so that was perfect for testing VisionOS apps. You have enough space, you can walk around and play the whole game. But when I tried the game for the first time at home, I couldn't finish it anymore because I didn't have that space. So I changed the gameplay that you can also play everything while you are seated. So think about that if your app can be maybe played while you're seated and while walking around. Also think about if you could mix augmented reality parts with more immersive one, bringing your users to places where they couldn't be, like here above the clouds. Next, how will users control my app? I think a pretty important topic for the Apple Vision Pro is exhaustion. And I had this here with the rotation gesture in the game. I first tried Apple's native rotation gesture because I always think it's best to go with Apple's solution because it then often supports other functionalities as well. But I did some playtests and quickly saw that people didn't look always at objects and then it didn't work. So I had to come up with a better solution. And my solution was, as we can see here, to use custom hand tracking. So you just have to pinch one middle finger and drag the level around. And even though it's just a tiny gesture, it can get exhausting when you have to do it multiple times for each level. So I came up with a better solution. So if you only press one middle finger, the level keeps rotating. And this way, you can always rest your arms in between on your laps and makes it much more comfortable for the user. So always keep the comfort of your users in mind. The next point is actually funny because I'm not sure if I even follow the tip, but think about, can I explain it easier? In the first version of Porta Nubi, I explained everything by text. And as I said already before, people do not read texts. And so I asked a friend if he could help me by creating some animations, and I thought they worked great. Until I did some playtests, and again, people got stuck. So I combined both approaches, and guess what? People got stuck. So with what did I end up? With animations, texts, and videos. And that's maybe not the easiest solution, but I think the most understandable one. Because people can really watch the video over and over again and see what they have to do. And if I would have thought about that in the beginnings, I probably could have saved some time, and that's why I wanted to show you this example. And since I use text in my games, another super important thing is to localize your app. I think especially in times of AI, it's easier than ever because you can really add context to your text and you get a much more precise translation. But maybe you tell me because I have no idea what it says. And lastly, how can I make my app more accessible to everyone? I think this is still a topic that doesn't get the attention it deserves. Because I think it's super easy to fall into the thinking of, I have no time for this, or I don't know how I should make my app accessible. And I think if it's not solvable in one way, maybe there is another way we can tackle it. And I think I had this in Porta Nubi because there I couldn't think of a way how you can play it with voiceover because it's just so focused on visual stuff. But the Apple Vision Pro and spatial computing has much more challenges in terms of accessibility. For example, if you miss an arm or a middle finger, you cannot make custom gestures. And I currently have this problem with Porta Nubi, that you cannot play the game if you miss the middle finger, for example. But the good news is that the Apple Vision Pro is a super accessible device. So for example, you can map your the pinch gesture to your eyes. So when you look at something longer, it detects this as a pinch gesture. And I use this to create an input panel that follows your head, and you can navigate the whole game with buttons. This way, you can play the whole game with your eyes only. Next, make use of this amazing technology. I think as a developer, it's a super exciting platform because we have so many new technologies we didn't have before, like world tracking, hand tracking, spatial personas, and share play. And I think with that, we can create so many new ideas that are still unexplored. And you can inspire others with that. And that's what I also try to do with my talk here. Because as DoodleJump did it for me, I want to show you that you can even create in smaller teams or even completely alone something amazing. And you can do the same. We are so early of this new platform that you can create new ideas with others and inspire them. And while doing so, try to think beyond 3D. I think it's already quite a challenge to switch from app development to a 3D environment, but we should go a step further. Because with spatial audio, we can place audio where it would be in the real world, or we can place objects in the room of the users. And this also brings me to my last point. Make users forget they are actually wearing the device. I think that's the most important point. And in Porta Nubi, I didn't even have this in the game itself, but with the level selection. So here you can see the very first version. It was working fine, I could switch the level, but it was kind of lame and not spatial at all. And I wanted to change that. So I tried some things. For example, here I just loaded the level, and it was already great that I could simply use this miniature version of the levels, but it was a bit bloated. And back then, Joseph Simpson, the creator of the Step into Vision community, wrote a blog article about portal materials. And it's great because it really adds depth to Windows. And I also remember back then a video from the DubDubTC where they showed a robot jumping from a volume into full space. And I was already wondering back then why no one even used that before. And I used both approaches and combined them together. And here we can see the result. The portal material adds depth to the windows, so we have these miniature versions of the levels, but the true magic happens when you start the level. Because then suddenly the level floats from the window into the real world. And I think this is the point we should aim for as developers. Because at this point I really had the feeling that the model is floating into my world. And how do we achieve that? The first point is keep the immersion alive. Every kind of lag or low quality breaks this illusion. And I think especially in times of AI, you can really stand out with high quality. And I had this also in Porta Nubi. I was looking a long time for an artist that helps me with the art style, and I couldn't find anyone. So I thought I'd try it myself. And as you can see, I have no idea what I'm doing in Blender. And I'm really happy that I throw away this idea. Because with that, you wouldn't have this level of immersion which I have with the simple art style I have today. A small fun fact, here's actually the part where I came up with the idea of using clouds, because the idea back then was to move light from one island to the other. And while I threw away the islands, I like the idea to sit in a cloud and guide the light. Then make the controls as intuitive as possible. I think it's always great as a developer when people ask, for example, hey, can I do this? And then they just try it and it works. And I think that's super important to keep the immersion alive. I have this, for example, here, when people are inside the box and they always ask me, hey, can I directly jump over there? And sometimes they just try it and it works. And I think we have to give them this level of user experience that it doesn't break the illusion. And the good news is, the simplest idea can be sometimes the most immersive ones. And I think the best example for this is AirDraw. I always show this app around when I show the Apple Vision Pro. While the technology behind this is for sure complicated, the idea of drawing is super simple and exists forever. And people really forget that they are wearing the device. They start doodling and they could do it forever. I sometimes even have to stop them. And I think that's a great showcase of how spatial computing should be. And another great example we have here today with Peter, who is not in the room, but still, it's his app Paradise. While the technology again behind it is quite complicated, he showed me his render pipeline once, and I have no idea what kind of black magic he's doing there, but he does it with such a high quality that you really think you're inside a car. And I think that's the use case I want to have as a user, that I really feel like I sit inside there. And it's great, because that way I can already imagine how it will be in my Aston Martin when the Apple Vision Pro takes off and everyone is buying Porta Nubi. And there's only one more thing. Since the award, I prepared 10 new levels for Porta Nubi, and I want to release them today, so you can be one of the very first that plays the new levels. And if you're interested, you can come by for a promo code. I'm happy to share one. But if you like the presentation, you can, of course, also buy them. So it takes some while, no connection, I will release it. And that's it. Thank you very much.